Riddle me this, caped crusader. What's a Batman without his Joker? Similar to a riddle without a punchline. Unsatisfying. With no colorful rogues gallery, Bruce Wayne would just be a billionaire in rubber pajamas hammering the crap out of low-level thugs night after night. Entertaining, but not super necessary. What would young Master Link do with no Ganondorf to kick around? Fish and hang glide, probably? Where would Tupac and Biggie be today without their famous rivalry? Bad example. The takeaway is, incredible and captivating bad guys are at the heart of almost every good adventure story, especially in the realm of video games. A truly iconic final boss can make your franchise. And if your baddie is awesome enough, we're even willing to overlook things like logic and reality. Sort of like how it's daytime when Bane starts this heist, and then the middle of the night 8 minutes later. You didn't notice at the time because Christopher Nolan's a good director, and there was some serious Batmaning going down to distract you. So, who cares if their scheme makes, quote, sense, unquote, as long as by the end of it, we're shaking with a hard-earned dopamine release while hurling our rival into space, or locking them up, or gunning them down. You've likely got yourself an awesome villain, a well-defined hero, and a fun game. So it is in no way to detract from their grim legacies that we lovingly profile the gaping holes in the maniacal machinations of these three sinister psychopaths. It's three great gaming villains whose plans make no sense. A snake. Made of liquid? What's next, a gaseous horse of some kind? I mean, yes, snakes are slippery, granted, but that doesn't make them liquid. Hope someone got fired for that blunder. Could you imagine if that was the whole video? Now, what actually falls apart when you dig into Liquid Snake's plan is not his code name, but rather his lifelong quest to avenge himself upon the world for being born the lesser of two evils. As is revealed in Metal Gear Solid, both Liquid and Solid are clones of the notorious Big Boss, the greatest soldier of the 20th century and famed cardboard box innovator. Liquid inherited all of Big Boss's recessive genes, while Solid got the dominant ones. Liquid has felt less than his whole life as a result, despite leading a band of child soldiers and becoming the youngest person ever to serve in the British Special Air Service. He hates his clone daddy for spawning him, hates his clone bro for killing Big Boss before he got a chance to, and would do anything to prove his worth to his dead dad and the whole Snake family at large. Which is odd, because that's not how genes work. In reality, dominant genes are not inherently better or worse than recessive genes. They're just the genes that are more likely to manifest. So, like, the gene for healing factor could be recessive, while the gene for adult onset diabetes could be dominant. And in fact, Liquid Snake is ultimately found to have the best fighting genes of all between himself, Solid, Solidus, and Big Boss. Fighting genes also not being a real thing. Although genes are indeed the blueprint for life, that doesn't make them a Dragon Ball Z style power level dictating whose genes would win in a fight.
Over 9,000!
All of which is information that you'd think Liquid would know, given the fact that his plan for global domination involves genes, cloning, genetic manipulation, DNA-housed superviruses, and replicated soldiers. Even if Big Boss said he was inferior as a kid, he should have figured out it was a lie by this point in his life. Newsflash. If you're gonna mutate a clone army to do your bidding, you're gonna need to know what an allele is and why brown hair is more prevalent than blonde hair, at least. Not to mention the fact that a nuclear-armed tank that walks around is way less efficient than, say, a well-shielded missile silo or stealth fighter jet. The proprietary railgun Metal Gear Rex boasts is mainly badass because it can fire a nuke without showing up on radar. But in theory, once you invented such a gun, you could strap it to anything, a computer-controlled satellite included. Tanks were invented in the first place to crush enemy battlements without falling into trenches. By comparison, Metal Gear Rex is a tank loaded with nuclear material piloted by a human soldier that can easily trip in an open manhole cover. It also has a radome, that Epcot Center-looking radar orb, that intentionally renders Metal Gear Rex blind when destroyed, forcing the pilot to open up the cockpit and remove the main benefit of being in a tank. Being in a tank. Otacon, the designer of Metal Gear Rex, thought that their invincible multi-billion-dollar nuke machine needed a, quote, character flaw. That's canon. And that's a cannon. But Even with the best super cannon in the world, the Emmerich family's obsession with making tanks walk instead of roll is pretty much a step backwards technologically speaking. Legs have lots of moving parts, and losing one completely destabilizes your vehicle, whereas a treaded tank can take plenty of hits to the feet and keep on coming. Mechs do look way cooler though, so we went with it, in a shared suspension of disbelief now referred to as AT-AT derangement syndrome. Dr. Ivo Eggman Robotnik's goal throughout the new canon Sonic games is to found a robot utopia by any means necessary. Those means inevitably involving recovering the Chaos Emeralds so that he can harness their energies to power a series of devices and super weapons. Unfortunately for Ivo, the magic batteries he wants almost always seem to be buried right around where Sonic's chillin'. And Sonic doesn't take kindly to you interrupting his chillin' by roboticizing all his furry little homies. But my question is, hey, what about that Death Egg? You know, the Eggman's face-shaped Death Star that's not to be confused with the space colony Ark, which is the half-Death Star shaped like the face of Eggman's grandfather, Gerald. Now, without getting too deep into the history of the Robotnik line, let's just say that the Death Egg appears in a multitude of Sonic games, and inevitably shuts down, crashes to Earth, or otherwise fails when Dr. R can't get the Chaos Emeralds together, and Sonic or an associate wrecks up the place. It's easily the size of a mountain and potentially the size of a small moon or big asteroid. The Death Egg is filled with incredible robotic technologies and traps, and in the game Sonic Battle, we even find out that the Death Egg has a final Egg Blaster weapon that's capable of wiping out whole star clusters even without the Chaos Emeralds to charge it up. So what's he waiting for? Instead of constantly antagonizing a magic hedgehog who tends to hang out on one particular tropical island, maybe go live in the orbiting robot utopia you've already built. Robotnik, you've been very clear that you don't care where the Eggman Empire starts. So why always try to start it right in Sonic's backyard? Take your ball and go home, Ivo. You did it. Go build as many robots as you want on your massive robo-moon that looks like your head. In the wise words of Emerald, the Gizoid from Sonic Battle, if you're smart enough to build a huge battleship like this, I'm sure you can find something else to do.
I hate that hedgehog!
Before there were ghosts making sure that we never died no matter what, there was a Forerunner monitor named 343 Guilty Spark, making sure of the opposite. Obviously, the Covenant and Flood are the true villains of the Halo storyline, but I think a lot of us felt pretty betrayed in Combat Evolved when 343 calmly and suddenly tried to convince us to etch-a-sketch away all sentient life in the galaxy. I mean, that's not cool. 343 Guilty Spark. No wonder you're guilty. We woke you up and introduced you to our virtual girlfriend. Now you're gonna blow up the galaxy? Punk move! But a move that makes sense, since Guilty Spark was left behind by the Forerunners, the ancient race who built the Halos in an attempt to keep the galaxy free of xenomorphs. I mean, Flood, no matter how many times they return. What makes somewhat less sense is why the Forerunners did that from their own perspective. Now, Halo is fraught with lore, but please bear with me here as I argue with myself like a madman. So, if you're the Forerunners and you build a complex of super weapons, shielded worlds, and containment areas for studying the Flood, then decided they were such a threat that the only choice was to wipe out all sophisticated sentient life in the galaxy, why leave a few Flood contained safely on the Halo? It's like burning your restaurant down for the insurance money with the insurance policy still inside. Whoa! Slow down, Michael. Okay? I already hate you, and here's why. The Forerunners kept a few Flood in containment in the hopes that someday a great thinker might find a way to subdue or destroy them without resetting the galaxy. It's out of hope for the future, bud. But why would you need to discover a safe way to wipe out the Flood if the Halo complex can wipe out all of the Flood by starving them of their food source? If I cleared all the food out of my house and chilled in a space ark outside until all of the many rats that infest my walls died of starvation, I wouldn't keep one rat alive as a pet to learn more about rats. It's moot, man. Strangle that one rat and we're done dealing with this. The Flood are insidious, you moron. If you missed even one tiny colony of flood in the whole galaxy, when you tried to repopulate, you'd eventually end up re-flooded, and you bet your ass you'll wish you had more data on those suckers when the time comes. But if there's such an unstoppable threat, why only allow entities deemed to be reclaimers to fire the halo? Why not let 343 Guilty Spark fire that bad boy all by himself? No need to convince Master Chief, no need to explain, just an immortal AI watchdog standing ready to do what needs to be done whenever it needs to be done. Because, you insufferable asshat, AIs are fallible. They fragment over time and give way to rampancy and other flaws. The ancient race, called the Precursors, who handed humans the mantle of responsibility of caring for lesser life forms, and the Forerunners who intercepted that mantle, killed the Precursors, and devolved humanity, despite their differences, are at least still all mortal organic beings who have some skin in the game and might think twice before wiping out all complex life in the whole galaxy. It's the same reason we build nukes, but by and large, try not to drop them if we can avoid it, and don't let a computer decide when to launch. But not only would they think twice, almost any sentient being would never pull that trigger. Why build a super duper uber mega weapon and then trust the decision of whether to fire it to organic life forms? You know, their minds can fragment too, real easy. It's called emotion and mental illness. And I'm pretty sure we're displaying both right now. Calmer than you are. Some would argue that an AI, however flawed, that's able to maintain a space station as well as its own consciousness for 100,000 years, and who has experience simulating trillions of firings of the Halo, and was once a living organic human named Chakis, before his consciousness was transferred into a monitor body, might actually be more trustworthy than a puny mortal life form whose fallible meat brain is under intense stress and being forced to make sweeping galactic decisions moment by moment. You're such an idiot. But if you can put people's souls into little flying robots like 343 Guilty Spark, why didn't the Forerunners just do that to their whole species before triggering the Halo? Since it only affects organic life, you'd all be immortal robots, and your enemies would all be dead and therefore unable to eat you anymore. Then they'd all be AIs and they wouldn't have been able to trigger it. AIs can't trigger the Halo, okay? They aren't reclaimers because they're not a human reclaiming the mantle from the Forerunners. That's why the word is reclaimer. It's just the way it is. But only because the Precursors chose to make it that way. They could have given the mantle of responsibility to multiple species, but instead they picked a favorite and sparked a galactic civil war. Then, in a last-ditch attempt to not get genocided, they turned themselves into space dust that eventually became infected and turned into the Flood. That's why the Flood can access Precursor technology. I mean, one of the Flood grave minds even says it kind of considers itself still a Precursor and won't, quote, let their creations rise up against them again. I mean, for a godlike race, they seem to have up an awful lot. Personally, I think the mantle is just a code of beliefs they founded, not something with objective reality. Like the Constitution. First of all, the version of the mantle that the Forerunners practice is very different than the original body of beliefs founded by the Precursors. They rewrote it to justify their slaughter of the Precursors and try to maintain an endless galactic hegemony. Which implies that the mantle is something that can change over time. Shut it! And although the Precursors were simply an alien race once, you have to understand that they became so advanced, we can't even comprehend the levels at which they can warp reality. Like Arthur C. Clarke said, any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. Yeah, especially fidget spinners. Boom! Clarked your ass! So, in a very real way, yes, the mantle has to go to humanity, yes, because the Precursors said so. They get to say so. Them and the Forerunners are out here evolving and devolving entire species, bruh. Precursors were basically gods from our point of view, and the Forerunners are messing with the natural order that the Precursors set down by perverting the mantle to suit their own species' purposes. According to Precursor and Forerunner mythologies. But those are also fallible. We see throughout the series that all of these races are susceptible to infighting and disagreements. I mean, after all, if the Precursors really had the ability to warp the fabric of reality, you'd think they'd have made some rules like no existential threats to the galaxy will ever come to exist, and also free ice cream for everyone. The simple fact that they couldn't create a galactic utopia with a snap of their Lovecraftian tentacles implies that they were, although incredibly advanced, just super cool aliens. Not like the gods or narrators of this universe. Hell, they got killed off by the Forerunners. How omnipotent could they have been? They were limited as opposed to infinite, and it is therefore possible for precursors to have had a bad idea. For all we know, the Halo complex was a bad idea on their part. And now what, we're all supposed to act like it makes sense as a response to the flood just because it's been floating in space for a really, really long time? And old stuff must be true, right? The ancients must be right about everything, because they're old and dead now. Oh, so what? What are you saying? You hate Halo? You think I'm stupid because I like Halo? No, I just... F you, dude! I'm gonna find you! Wow, I got out of hand. Do you have any favorite villains whose plans fall apart if you think about them for too long? Or do you simply disagree with my interpretation of Halo lore? In which case, then by definition, you agree with the other version of me, so ha! Gotcha! Either way, let us know what you thought of the vid down in the comments, and for way too much unpacking of all things gaming, keep it locked to IGN.
Next Gen Console Watch 2020 is IGN's weekly show reporting on all the latest PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X news. We'll bring on experts to discuss and analyze all the latest developments of what's coming to the new generation of consoles. Join us weekly on Fridays at 8 a.m. Pacific.